Okay, well, we will take a time. Call the meeting to order. We're at 8:33. First order of business today is looking at the 26 fee schedule. That's the primary order of business. We also had the warrant committee and a review, but given everybody here was at that meeting, we're spending any time on that. We can save that for the full school committee on Wednesday. So it makes sense. It's okay with you, Kate? Can we jump through the fee schedule?
Sure.
There's the presentation in the folder.
Okay, so today we are going to focus on the fees associated with athletics. And so there is a fee for the middle school as well as a user fee for the high school. So our proposal is to update the base fee for the middle school and high school athletics. So for the middle school, we'd be increasing the fee that we're charging families by, or for the student participation by $25. And then at the high school, we would increase that base fee by $50. And so the fee is charged per student athlete per season. So for whatever sport that they participate in, they pay a fee for that season. The fees are capped by family, and that cap is for applies for the entirety of the school year. And so we're also proposing, due to the increase in the base fee for each one of the sports per season, we're also proposing to increase the family cap to $1,200 a year. And so I didn't put it in the summary up at the top in the proposal, but we're also proposing an increase to the hockey or swim fee, and that would be an increase of $50 for both hockey and swim. So it would go from $350 to participate in either one of those sports to $400 to participate. And again, it's $1,200 family cap. So with the family cap, regardless of the number of students, the number of sports, the most that family would have to pay for the entirety of the year would be $1,200. So as a part of the process, when we discussed increasing the athletic fees, we met with Karen. Karen is here as well. So if there's any questions that you may have with the athletic director and with the administrative assistant that supports athletics, we met to discuss the fees. We looked at the user fees that are being charged for a number of comparable districts, and that was broken out by kind of the region that they participate in, or the, I don't know if you call it the division or whichever, like grouping. And so just looking at what each one of these comparable districts are charging, not only for the participation per sports, but also looking at the family cap, if there's any individual cap. So there's a number of different factors that are taken into account when looking at the fees. And so we did feel that by increasing the fee, we certainly are not going to be the lowest, but we're also not charging the most. So kind of we would be within that range for the upcoming school year. And this again would go into effect for the for fiscal year 26 or for the 2025-2026 school year.
What is the TBL ESC? Is that the?
I think that's the
division.
division, thank you,
Yeah.
yes, the division that they participate in.
And so when we look at the middle column, I'll start with the middle column,
Mhm.
District 7, so say for Franklin. 100, 600, 350, I mean, 1,600, 350, is that, like, what's that breakout?
I don't, so I can find out the details. I'm not sure. I believe it would be the differentiation per sport, but do you know him?
My notes talk.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe the Franklin, is, I can't see that far away.
That's
But the cap, and then some of the sports that require that additional fee due to like swimming and hockey, when we go to the outside age,
Yeah.
outside
Mhm.
venues and so forth.
Okay,
And there's no cap, it says for Franklin. And then
so Milford, there's absolutely no, there's no fee, but the family cap is.
it says, used to be per sport for both of those categories. I think it says used to be 125 and then used to be 375.
Oh, okay, I was thinking.
So they must have recently eliminated the fee. And I think for some of these communities too, they're going through a similar process that we're going through where they're looking to either change the fees or, I know some communities are definitely thinking about, having conversations about increasing.
Could you? Sorry, can you just go back to our slide, I just wanted to.
With the comps, and then when we look at the number of students that participate just based off of the numbers for this year, and then if we were looking to increase the fees for the proposal, we're estimating that we would be bringing in about $45,000 additional revenue that we'd be able to utilize to offset expenses to run those programs.
So that number didn't change from our previous estimate.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we talked about this before, and I don't have it in front of me, so do we know as a total? What? So it's contributing towards the cost, it's not net, it's not neutral,
Correct,
so
right.
do you know how much it costs us? Over and above the fees to?
So I know there's a number of different budget lines in the operating budget. For athletics, the stipends alone, I believe, are over 600,000
Okay,
for the fiscal year.
look, I didn't have it in front of me.
And so I don't have the total number just for that specific area of the budget, but it's a fraction
Fractions I thought.
of the cost.
And so just like this, all the fees encompass, it's like the uniform, the transportation,
Mhm.
time. So there's nothing over and above that typically that they would pay. So if it's like if they're going to a tournament, anything, everything's.
Everything is included. And I think for some of the sports, if they're going someplace and they may have to, if they're staying overnight or if it's something where they're traveling a longer distance, I know that many of the teams do fundraising to be able to cover those costs. The boosters certainly are contributing and helping to be able to provide different, if it's just experiences for the teams. So that's definitely a part of it too. But yes, the user fee does cover the transportation, any like entrance fee, it covers the rentals for us to be able to use certain facilities. The stipends for the coaches, any of the equipment that we have to purchase.
Maybe I'm just curious, from Karen, if you want to talk a little bit about kind of process for, in case all this comes up, for students that can't afford the fees and kind of what percentage of students maybe come forward and request some kind of fee reduction or are unable to pay the fees.
I don't have that number, but, I know, the athletics department works with students who can't afford. We had a conversation about the free and reduced process, you know, to identify those students who are reduced versus free and how they fall into that category. We don't deny any student access to participate in athletics if they can't afford it, just like anything we do here. But I don't have. I don't like that's just.
Yeah, I was just talking about that as support.
Yeah,
Yeah.
One question I had was, we historically have had two different caps, right? The family cap with hockey and swim, the family cap without. Thinking around why doing away with that, so, a single cap versus a higher cap for families versus swim and swim.
The cost of hockey and swim. So, well,
Well, I think that was the rationale for why there historically was an extra $100 on their cap. Now there is not.
Recording and
So again, I didn't know if that was
yeah.
for clarity's sake, to have one fee or.
So when we talked about it on Friday, we had talked about just looking at the numbers of students that participate and kind of who would actually have to pay the per sport, or the number of families that would actually hit that family cap. And so when we had looked at it, it was with the $900 family cap, with the rate increase, it essentially would be like 1 point something students would hit that family cap. And so we thought it would be appropriate to almost just align the family cap so it would be consistent. And by increasing the family cap, it's now closer to you essentially, I don't know if you want to, I don't want to call it a discount, but you essentially would hit that family cap having the 2 students that participate in multiple sports, regardless if it's one of the kind of the higher fee-based sports or not. And so we just, when we had talked about it last week, we just thought that bringing those into alignment seemed to make more sense than having 2 different family caps. I think also looking at the administration of the fees, and we're charging at different times throughout the year. And so just, I think it just made more sense to us administratively to set one family cap rather than having different family caps that kind of just become difficult to manage and keep track of as well. Karen, I don't know if there's anything else from our conversation that was kind of important to.
we already felt that the students that were doing hockey swim were paying that additional fee already because of the pool or the rink or whatnot, you know, that differential. And that's true for a lot of communities. You have to pay that difference. So we wanted to be consistent with the fee just for that reason of they're already paying that extra to do the sport. So let's have the cap fee for $1,200 for everyone. And we felt it balanced out when it came to transportation and how many buses certain people take to go to, some teams take multiple buses, whereas some teams take one bus or just take the van, or we felt in the end it really balanced it out with access for all of the different sports.
38% of our families hit the family cap this year. So it's a pretty big number. And our participation is excellent. Athletics, I think, is a pretty significant part of the experience for students in some instances at the high school. So
And again, this is just a seasonal fee, so they hit this cap for fall sports, spring sports.
the family cap is for the year.
Okay,
It's for the year. So
family caps for the,
if you have two students that play a fall sport and a winter sport, you could potentially hit that family cap by the winter. If you had like two hockey players and two football players. Mhm. And then the spring is free per se. There's no fee associated with. Mhm. Yes, that's for the year. It's not per season.
any other questions folks have on the fees? So, it's on the agenda to discuss or vote on Wednesday. Seems reasonable to me. I mean, it is fairness to families that'll be impacted, a 25% increase on most fees, 33% increase on the cap. So these are not small jumps for families who are also going to whatever impact of the upright passes of that tax bill. Seems reasonable in line with the other data you showed. Comparison communities.
So, are you voting these fees out of finance?
I guess, yeah, so we can vote to recommend these fees. Are there other fees beyond athletics that you want to bring forward for next year?
Not
Beyond the
today.
ones we've already, yeah.
Not today. I do think that we had talked about potentially looking at the extracurricular participation fee, similar to the process that we went through with athletics. But we want to again go through a similar process. So we haven't yet collected the comp data. So we want to do that. And then right now, the extracurricular participation fee is just one fee for the high school. And so we had talked about potentially looking at certain activities and seeing if, as we do for swim and hockey, would it make sense to potentially have kind of the tiered approach for extracurricular? So that's something that we'll bring to a future meeting. And then we also, at a future meeting, will have to set the rates for community schools. So I'm meeting with the community schools director tomorrow, just so we can finalize what our proposal would be for that.
Okay. Given I think it would make sense to vote on any and all changes kind of as a whole.
Yeah.
It's a slate.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any reason. So if it
It's
is there.
not on the agenda on Wednesday. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Makes
can
sense anyways.
Okay. So we can try to have those proposals ready maybe for finance subcommittee for next week,
Next Wednesday.
and then if
You'll be
there's-
voting them all on the 16th. I'm gonna add that in right now, so it doesn't get left off.
Just makes sense, because I think that would be great, because we'd be able to do community schools and extracurricular. And then I think that's it. We've already done transportation, the summer programs. We have athletics. And then we should be, fee schedule for 26 should be
So,
pretty well set.
yeah, so we'll discuss it in finance on the 9th, so voting and voting on the 9th, and school committee on the 16th.
Okay, I've added.
Anything else on fees? All right, through that nice and quick. So still on the agenda, we have FY 26 updates. Now that more members are here, we can kind of jump back and do a brief update on the warrant committee presentation, which occurred last week, as well as the community presentation that occurred last week. Both of those were on Wednesday. So we had on last Wednesday, the community group or community presentation at Pierce. Appreciate Bill Fish, Dr. Fish for showing up and attending, as well as all the residents of the town who came. We had about, it's a handful of folks, about 6 folks sitting around there. It's a good discussion. Feel like questions were asked, questions were answered. Everybody seemed to walk away with a good understanding kind of what was going on and positivity about the direction forward. We have another one of those community presentations. Is it tomorrow night?
Yeah, tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning and tomorrow night. Yes. So tomorrow morning at 8:30 at Cunningham. And tomorrow night, 6 o'clock on Zoom. Is there any reminder note? I know all the school weeklies were going on.
Yeah, like your budget updates.
I think we just need to, we talked about this, briefly just as we were concluding that, but I think we just need to really get the presentation tighter and more concise. So that we have
At least half the time for questions.
more than half. I would
Yeah.
say
Because we had about 15
We-
minutes for questions.
so I'm not sure we want to tweak any of just the plan for that. I think we just need to really watch the clock, and it needs to be by 20 past, like the presentation is done. And we can just go quickly through things and say, if you have a lot of questions about these topics, we can spend more time in the Q&A, because we certainly have a lot in the appendix and a lot of additional information, but I just think we ran out of time. We could have kept, it was good. I think it was sufficient, but had there been more people, we would not have had time for more questions. So I think we just need to. So I think we had the slide deck has been slightly condensed.
Do we want to look at that?
The version
Probably, yeah.
we made a copy that says 4/1/25, and I think we condensed the introduction and put a couple of the detail slides into the appendix that won't be necessarily addressed in the presentation.
Do you know where that is?
It's in your drive.
Sorry, it's
There we
under.
go. Yeah. Selena and Anna, save you looking, I'll put it in the Zoom chat. Walk through what we consolidate or what we removed.
So I just, the things that we consolidated were to those top few slides just kind of combined, and those again can be pretty quick, but the two things that moved back to the appendix, I believe, were the specific information about more detail on the ELA curriculum and the NEC program redesign. I think those are mentioned in the context of FY 26 and the changes. There are slides with detail in the appendix now. So I think that, you know, it's just, if folks are looking for further detail on those, they can ask the question, we can speak to it, but those were the changes. And then I think it's just a general tightening of the whole. No, it's a lot,
Talking better, that's
or just less. Yeah,
less.
because we have at this point, like, shared this information multiple times in multiple ways, so I think it's just,
That's true. I think it's always just hard to understand what level, obviously, each person attending actually has engaged previously with the conversation. And so like assuming that they know something.
I think that can be the part of the framing. It's just like, thank you. That can be the framing is, you know.
All right, thank you, Karen. Sorry.
If people have, you know, if anybody here today, which is perfectly, it's great if it's the case, but if this is your first time like learning anything about this, you know, we are going to go through this overview pretty quickly. Please like ask your clarifying questions and we can go into more detail on anything, but I just think err on the side of going quickly so that we can get through the questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the questions that came up, presentation, I think mostly covered all the questions that were brought up. There were multiple questions on them in the ELA curriculum.
I think your point of the audience changes. Do you know what I mean? Like, so for some people that might not be as, so if you touch on it and then there are questions, then you have a slide to go to from more detail.
Say if anyone has questions on these, we can come back to them in more detail. And I would say similarly for the best practices, you know, and the changes we've made, I think we can really overview those and, you know, say we're just happy to provide further detail. Especially like tomorrow morning, people are going to be trying to go to work.
Likelihood is most people coming to the forum presentation are going to be people who have been engaged to some degree, not just coming, not having read or seen anything.
I don't think we should assume that. I mean, I think the audience we're driving at is people who maybe are like, oh yeah, like, let me learn about this. Because we haven't been out to the schools yet. But I think the point is, you know, we can spend as much time, we can like keep presenting, like if the questions are calling for presenting.
Yeah. Like the one
But we first need to like set it, and then, you know, what we can't have is we have like 5 minutes left and 10 people who haven't gotten to ask their question. Or even 2 people who haven't gotten to ask their question, because we're gonna have to go.
Is there a way that if a community member doesn't have the opportunity to ask a question during that time, can we say to them, either send us an email, or I don't know if there's a way in not only just responding directly to that email, but would it make sense for us to like almost answer it during these meetings or during a school committee meeting where.
That's a great idea. I mean, I think we could implement that for both of them tomorrow. Sure, we could say if you don't get to ask your question, submit your question and we can try to respond to it in the Wednesday discussion. It's a good idea. I mean, that's like a backstop, you know, if we end up with like a lot more people than we expect. That's what's also hard about it is like, if you're someone who comes to one where there were a handful of people, you have the benefit of like a really like a nice back and forth conversation, which is if there's a, I don't know, maybe are we going to have like 20 people come, then by definition, you're not getting that same dynamic, and that's fine, you know, just.
So the one that's up tomorrow night is, since it's on, is there a way? Is there a way to capture questions in the chat that we don't get to? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like, I just don't want to have it.
So it's a Q&A, so there'll be two ways people can ask a question. They can type it into the Q&A, which is good because then it's captured there, and somebody can, one of us will be able to like read out the question. And that's nice because then people, they don't feel like asking their own question, but they don't ask an answer. Providing that opportunity. Alternatively, I think people can raise their hand and be, you know, allowed to speak if they would prefer to speak their question. And that one we said would be recorded tomorrow night. So the presentation element of it gets shared, you know, as something people can watch.
Anything folks think is missing from the community presentation? Yeah, sorry. So,
Is there a place, and maybe it's talk about it. So I'm going to go with the override scenario. The question keeps, I think the question has come up is this enough, or will we be coming back in a year? Is there a scenario, or will you specifically say? Sort of, I think in a way what we've said is it has to be like this is, if this is the override budget that we're given. We will work to this budget. Do you know what I mean? Like explicitly say that. So if there are things internally, because I think there's been a lot of, I think with, you know, having earlier, like the needs-based budget and some of those things that if we're coming to the town asking for the people to approve this override, just, I think explicitly saying that this is what we want to do, like we'll work to this budget.
for next year
For next year, but
and in future
You're
years.
talking about 27.
we're talking about 27, but I guess the question comes up is, so the town is projecting this override will carry us through to. Are we making the commitment as well to do that? You know, so we're saying this is our budget. We're, you know, we have built this so that we will that we will not be coming back. Our intent is specifically to not come back. We've recognized that the special education costs are the ones that tend to be the most fluid. We've put something in place to address the unanticipated costs. So outside of anything beyond that, that is our intent. Does that make sense? I just feel like people need to hear it.
Yeah, the intent is not to come back for another override request until FY30 and soonest. It's the current.
And the intent is to put practices in place that will not have us come back. I think it would be requested.
Yes, creating sustainable
Great, sustainable.
options. Yeah.
Selena?
Yes, I appreciate sort of what you're saying, Amanda. Amanda, and I do think that it's important in terms of the language that we use. I think our intention is to live within the budget, the proposed budget, and to, I think, manage costs as much as possible. I guess what I am a little or a bit apprehensive about is the fact that there is so much going on at the federal level and so much that we don't know. And we have yet to have a conversation as to what, we just don't know what the impact is going to be on school districts overall. And so given that uncertainty at the, in terms of external factors, I think it's important for us to just manage those expectations, obviously, right? We're going to do everything possible internally to look at our costs, look at our expenses, and make sure that we're being strategic and even more thorough than we've been. But I guess I just caution us. There's so much that we don't know.
Right, no, I agree on this, I agree, I mean, I think the federal question is a big question and how it impacts state funding.
Well, if we see increases as we've seen over the last number of years on services, we will, I mean, living within the budget and not having another override means probably, yeah.
I did add, so there was the town context slide. I'll just flag that I did update that slide. It's further down. Yeah, that. No, sorry.
So,
No, that one.
let's go, yeah.
Okay, so I updated it. I kept the Prop 2.5 information there, just like sort of some more concise, but it's bigger than the town fiscal reality. It's the town and the state, and maybe what we should add here. So there's Prop 2.5 is an important piece of context. I put the piece of context there around, the fact, which we haven't emphasized very much. We didn't emphasize it at all last week in the session, is just so many other districts are facing very similar challenges. And I think it's not, we have unique challenges here, but we should be reminding people actually that, this is a widespread issue. So I added that piece there and just let people know for this coalition was created to call on our state officials. So that's an important piece of it. I don't know if, to Selena's point, we want to add one more bullet here. And these are not things that need to get talked through, but they're just here. They're pieces of information that people have. Maybe it's just uncertainty, about the direction of federal funding for education is something we'll need to manage going forward. Something, and then it's just this is all context that is outside of Milton, but that does affect us here.
I just had a little bit on Saturday night, I don't think I have that many all of the times. Going over ice, I didn't realize Easton is beaten. Okay, so I knew there was some that you hear about a lot, but we're talking to friends with autism.
But even if there was, I'm not proposing we add this to the slide for the community session, but I'm actually wondering if this would be important or helpful for us to. What's a slide of all the towns that are doing overrides this spring? Might provide a little perspective.
It's a quick slide to present.
Is that something you think you might?
I could try.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I could.
I had a business association meeting, just the regional meeting last week, and it was a very similar conversation. There's so many communities that even if it's not this year, it's potentially next year that they'll be having a similar conversation. So I can try to see if I can get some information on that.
Not even counting the ones who obviously did last year. Do you want to?
Sorry, can I ask one question back to the federal, you say federal funding for education? I just guess my other question would be around, we get Medicaid funding, like if there, because I think there's also a question on funding for health program. I think there is a question around both that might impact us. So I don't know that it's just specifically, it's like education and is it like health programs or because we do health and human services. If we want to impact us with it. I think you could just say health and human services. And I think there's no problem.
Well, there's definitely more things that could impact
But yeah, maybe it's just
the town.
Maybe you could say that impact school funding. Okay. Excellent.
Some stuff.
Oh,
I feel like it can't be exhaustive, obviously, but maybe if it's even helpful to have like, this is a couple from FY25. Couple from,
26.
you know, I think, because that is. We have to work through it right now, but. Like Hanover, Braintree, like a number of places nearby were just lost a year ago. Which could have been us.
Other thoughts, questions?
I just had a question on slide 13, where we talk about other districts are doing overrides. I personally see this as a negative to include this because I think it opens us up to scrutiny as to why one-time funds, ARPA, ESSER, were used for positions, knowing that we would be in this bind. And we've talked about the ARPA cliff for a couple of years. I'm just not, I think when we go in, it's like, because everybody's doing it, we should do it also is not really a good strategy, in my opinion. I think, you know, what we need to really focus on is obviously right sizing the budget, but then also what are we going to do? I mean, Selena brought up the point of federal funding and, how to, and also, how to live within our means going forward with all of these other things, implications that completely affect the budget. And I think that's where we need to show some sort of strategy to build confidence in the community that we're asking them to invest, but what are we going to do if all of these other things happen, right? Like where we lose, potentially lose federal funding that could impact state funding and so on and so forth. Like what is kind of our plan to live within our means, right? Like, are we looking at, we talk about, special ed increases and so on and so forth. Like what can we do internally to create programming so that we're referring less students out of district and so on and so forth. It just seems like we still have, holes where we're bleeding money from because we don't, like, how are we going to get control over that? I think that's what's kind of missing for me. Like, I know we've talked about improving practice, but really when other things are going to impact the budget down the road that we don't nothing about at this point, like how are we looking ahead and making sure we're planning for it a few years out instead of just kind of living in, let's just get through this year or let's just get through next year and then go ask for more if we can't. figure out how to balance the budget. I think really we should be focusing on like, this is why you have to trust us to invest in the schools. And we know like we have a good grasp on what's going to come down the line, and we have a way to kind of weather those storms going forward. And we are thinking ahead, not just for next year, but really thinking ahead of all those other implications that could potentially happen.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I feel like the budget for 26 was built with that in mind and to carry us forward. I think the only place where we're talking about unanticipated costs, which I understand what you're saying. I just don't know how from the federal standpoint. Like, I don't know. And maybe there's thoughts that we can put to it. I think that that's such an unknown. But I do think, I know that I do believe we need to think about the programming in some cases, maybe like, are there changes that we need to make, or training or other things that we could do to support the special ed piece of it. I hope we're talking about things beyond that so that that doesn't always become the area where we're talking about where we need to look at cost savings or programs. So I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we just need to kind of look at it holistically and see what do we kind of have in place, if we lose funding or unexpected costs come up, like where can we kind of, still be able to, live within our means. I think that's kind of the confidence piece that we have to give to the public in order for them to support it versus, if all these things go wrong, then we're going to be back asking for more money, and it's just, I think that's the part that I think, however we phrase that, I think that's a key factor in trying to just get more support behind it.
Selena?
Yeah, well, I think I follow your comment. I do think in many ways, these the circumstances that we find ourselves in this year have forced or maybe expedited sort of that process by which the district has had to look at itself and look at every line item and determine where there are opportunities to reduce cost. That has definitely been done. In addition to that, I think we've had to look at the budget and the development of the budget in a much more careful way, which now positions us to do better going forward. I think what I want us to sort of continue to keep in mind is that I think as a district, we are pretty efficient in terms of our costs. When I think of that quadrant, that scatter plot you showed, Mark, and where we are in that scatter plot, that is very telling in terms of what we do. We've been able to invest much less per pupil and still achieve pretty good results. And so that tells me that the efficiencies are in there. Now, of course, we're going to do everything possible to continue to live within the budget that, we get every year, knowing that there are external factors we can't control. But we're going to try to stay on top of those factors so that we can be proactive. So I just push a little bit in terms of like, where else are we going to find efficiencies? And also the fact that space is not something that we have a lot of, to be able to say, we're going to create more programs and we're going to be able to have the space for those programs. I think we need to think about the future and how the town how we set up ourselves up as a town so that as a district, we are able to keep more of our students here. And I think that's something we will get to over time. So that's just something that I just want us to be a little careful because I think there are a lot of really great practices that we're putting into place. We're thinking ahead and we're being forward. And also I think we need to be transparent of what we can and cannot control.
I think a lot of the concerns that Anna has raised for me are captured actually in bullet 2 here, implementation of budget recasting to make adjustments for impacts. You know, just we have articulated there, that is a major shift, which I expect should be informing all the work that's going to be happening starting in July of FY26 and going beyond. So maybe we can just further emphasize that because Anna, what you articulated a need for, I believe it's here. It's just maybe not like very detailed there, but
Yeah, I think that
I agree
really
with you
needs
that
to be kind of called
I
out
totally
more
need to
because
emphasize
I think it does get lost. I mean, it's a pretty
Yeah.
copy heavy slide, but
it's a
I
good
think
point.
it really needs to be articulated that that's something that we're going to practice because I think again, it gives the community just the reassurance that, that we are going to do everything we can to kind of stay within budget, even with unanticipated costs, right? Like when we're gonna we might
Yes.
have to get creative in some of these things. And I know we don't have all the answers to what that might be, but that's something that we're going to continue to refine and improve our process and, just kind of look at. And, I get space is a concern and all of that stuff, but I think really just like, hey, we're kind of, we're going to be really looking through and seeing where can we make, and are some of these positions, can they be combined? Like all of these things I know this year was kind of late to look at, like kind of reconfiguring some of those, but going forward, where can there be some, is there any overlap between positions, where they can be between, so that we can kind of just look at all of that and see, like, so there are a lot of factors that go into, what, or a lot of different ways. And I'm glad that we're kind of getting into that mindset and that really needs to be established, and kind of emphasized, I think, in the presentations to say that is going to be something that we're going to continually look at and then just kind of annually as well. And then obviously looking at the budget, as soon as July 1 or whenever the new year starts, just so that we are ahead of it and so that we're not surprised by it come January.
One other thing I was going to say in response to your other feedback is slide 13. Maybe that belongs in the appendix too.
Yeah.
We were talking about tightening and not lengthening the presentation. So Mark, can you move that down? Because I do think it could be helpful if a question comes up about, well, what other, are other communities dealing with this? Then it would be great to be able to share. Oh, yes, these are some communities that are, but maybe not including that in the main presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, I think that there could be, I think it's good to have it if it comes up as a question, but I think we just have to be careful of scrutiny if we kind of lead with that.
One other thing, and I think it kind of goes to what you were just saying, Lizzie, and I know it just keeps sticking with me when you said it, Katie, and maybe it's a place that just what Anna just said, it's that sort of like you're always working through budgets. The way you're thinking about it, last year's, the current year, constantly evaluating, and then next year, so I think that that thought process, that idea is helpful. It might be something you talk to as you're saying it, but I think it's not that you're just focused on this year and you're like, oh, we'll look at next year, or like as more information even comes in now about the impact of the previous year's fiscal year. Like, I think looking at it with that lens, that you're constantly taking in data and adjusting based on things. So, maybe that's just for you if you're talking, please talking shit, but just that piece I've just found very helpful.
I don't, would that, maybe up in the, even like the history? Or somewhere in there, just talking, I think with the history, that's a big piece of why we even are addressing the history.
Right.
Right, because of the impact that it has on the future.
Right.
And saying, this is what happened, and this is the impact to not only this year, but the impact to future fiscal years.
Right. Even now, you're looking at that through, like, so next year you will look at this year as you're building for the fall. Do you know what I mean? I just think it's just a mindset that's important for people to know, that it's just not like books are shut. We're on to the next thing, you know, or, oh, that was last quarter.
Right.
It's not that.
That's a huge piece of it. And when we talk about any of the shifts that may potentially happen in the future, just having that lens into upcoming fiscal years, knowing that even though we're not dealing with it within the current year's budget administration, that it is something that could potentially come up.
I think even because you've even talked about when Danielle was here last week, for this year, looking at next year, recognizing like, oh, in the fall, we had a number of referrals, more than we typically do, when typically in March, April, we start seeing a lot of referrals. So recognizing, okay, is this a trend? Is this something we need to keep in mind next year? So we're anticipating contracts. So just that sort of thing. So I think that's really helpful. So I don't want to belabor it. I just think I think it addresses the questions.
The last point I'd like to echo, I agree with Selena's point on, because I agree, and I think people have questions on, right, impacts of federal actions and those things. I do agree with Selena, though, in terms of the need to be just honest of, if it really depends on what happens at that level, and like the ability to plan for just an elimination of all federal funds is one scenario, but partial funds is another scenario. What does the state do to increase funding if that goes away? Like there's so many impacts potentially of that outcome that I think it's very hard to clearly state that within a presentation. I think it just kind of takes us off on a place that we're not going to have time for. And so I think just stating, like, you know, if the federal funding were to be eliminated, that's a question that kind of comes up, then like that is a reality that we will need to deal with, and the state will need to deal with, and every town across the country will need to deal with, because every single educational department in the nation depends on that funding. And you know, it might, I'm not sure, like in terms of speculating on what that might be is just challenging.
I think really it comes, sorry, I just want to jump in, just to clarify. I really think it needs to come back to our ability as a committee to, you know, do our job as elected representatives, to kind of, hey, we are going to be, whether it's working with other towns to figure out, like, you know, if there is some sort of change in funding, like what are we going to do? Like, instead of kind of just, you know, throwing our hands up and saying, oh, well, we lost federal funding, we have to, you know, like what, like, and that's something that we just have to be very clear on, is that we are going to do everything we can, you know, and working with other towns, or, you know, creating best practices internally to kind of, you know, just help make that impact, like, you know, like make, like least affect the students and the district as much as possible. Like, we are going to do everything we can, you know, and I think it's really just the reassurance to the community that the school committee is committed to that, you know, from like, we will do everything we can. We understand we're going to stay on top of it. We're going to continue monitoring it. We will work with other towns, you know, just to kind of figure out like best practices, like what can we do to kind of work around that as best as we can. Same thing, I think, you know, when we get into the override, like we're, you know, if there isn't an outcome that, you know, we want there to be, like, same thing, like we are going to have to figure it out. And I think it really just comes back to just having the school committees presenting this, giving the community the reassurance that we are equipped to, you know, kind of lead this charge and continue to do what's best for the district.
Peter's gonna need the pull here, because I know they need the room, not just, he's gonna leave.
Yeah.
Any last pressing things before we wrap? If anybody's watching or listening to this between now and tomorrow morning, please attend tomorrow morning at 8:30 at Cunningham Collycott, or tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on Zoom. Excited for that.
And one more next Monday night at the high school.
We have one more on the following Monday night. All right, we will move down to our next meeting is this Wednesday at 8 o'clock, not 8:30, and then we have another one on the 9th. We don't have one on Monday the 7th. Meetings. I will take a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? I will second it. I'm not sure. All right, I'll second. All in favor? That's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.